into our filter section where we just look at a few of the. We've only got, I think, 3 things that we're going to look at. Kind of newsy type articles that I think are important for pastors to know about. The first one, we just talked about mergers. Here's another church. We'll link to it in the show notes. But there's another church that I don't see my notes here, but I believe this is in San Antonio. I don't remember the name of the church. The church was used to be a mega church, was running about 3,000 on a Sunday morning, I think 6 or 7 years ago. They're now down to 200 people. Can you imagine? Down from a full staff, down to 1 pastor, and they're now being forced to sell their 60,000 square foot facility. It sounded like they were being proactive on selling it rather than like a lot of churches that get into these kind of troubles. They just don't pay their mortgage and get kicked out. They're actually making their mortgage, it sounds like, but they realize that they can't support that type of facility with 200 people. So maybe this would have been a good example of maybe where a transition or a merger would have been a great idea.
Yeah.
But it's probably too late now because the thing's up for sale, the facility's up for sale and everything. But a large church, dynamic, charismatic pastor. I assume there was some kind of conflict. He left, and a lot of people left with him. 6 years later, they're trying to still get a jump started, and they're down to 200 people. It's just a sad story.
Yeah, that's painful to watch. That those kinds of things, and I think we've both seen stories of that.
Yeah.
And one of the themes of the recent Willow Creek Summit was the idea of transition and pastoral succession. And I don't know the full story on the San Antonio church, but we are coming into a season where you have a lot of boomer pastors of mid-size and large churches that have the potential to go this way if transition isn't done well. Which if I remember correctly, there's something coming up in October that's talking a little bit about.
Oh, yeah. Actually, we're doing the 9s again this October, 25th and 26th, actually. It's going to be 2 days this year. But that's one of the topics we're going to talk about is transitions and succession plans. And we're going to actually hear from some people that are either right in the middle of it or on the back end of it, that they've already done it. And it's tough stuff, but it's got to happen. We're doing it at my church right now. We're kind of maybe 3/4 of the way through it. But no, those are tough deals to do, but they absolutely have to be done so that maybe you don't have a church of 3,000 one day and 200 a few years later, like this one church unfortunately did.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's hard stuff. Yeah.
Why don't you talk about this? The other story we saw about the pastoral housing allowance. It's headed to court, and it's kind of something that I think most pastors. It's one of the. I think it's probably like the last bastion of benefits, particularly for pastors.
Yeah.
My guess is that it's not going to. You better enjoy it while you have it, because it probably won't be here a whole lot longer. And maybe this case is going to be the thing that's going to affect it. Tell us a little bit more about
that. The housing allowance is basically it's a tax-free portion of your I won't say salary, but your package. Every pastor's package, and it makes it. It's a great deal for churches because they're able to hire people with skill levels that in the marketplace would be paid, a whole lot more. But because they're churches and churches don't tend to be, loaded, this gives them a chance to hire people and help them pay for housing and all that kind of stuff, and not have to pay as much. For the last several years, there's just been court case after court case from different groups that are trying to close this deduction for pastors.
Well, yeah, I mean, the article I read, Matt, that this one group claims that it's a $1.2 billion benefit for pastors in the U.S. So you're talking a lot of course, and a lot of people would like to see that $1.2 billion going to government coffers as well. So that's what all the brouhaha is about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this current case, I believe, was kind of launched after a previous case was shut down based on there was a pastor out west, I forget exactly where it was, who had two houses. He had his normal home and had a vacation home, and he was taking a housing allowance on both of them. And the IRS got a little irritated with that, and the Supreme Court said, well, no, actually, this is the way that the law is written. And then some other people started. Well, the group that's leading this current case is the Freedom from Religion Foundation. They've actually, I have to hand it to them. They're being pretty smart about this. They've looked at this from different ways. They've looked at this how to go about pursuing this case. Have had some thrown out of court because technically they weren't being discriminated against by this law. And so what they've gone and done, and this is, like I said, I got to give them credit. They've gone and given everybody on their staff a housing allowance. And because they are not ordained ministers, licensed ministers, they're not eligible to receive the housing allowance without going to jail because they didn't pay their taxes. Well, because of that, this case is being allowed to go through, and it's going to be fascinating to watch how this happens, because I agree with you. I don't know that the housing allowance is here to stay. I think it's going to be sunsetting really soon.
Yeah, no, and it doesn't help when you've got some people that are kind of dancing around there's a line, kind of a line in the sand of where the law is, and you've got some pastors that'll march right up to it, whether it's taking housing allowance for two houses or giving people that benefit that really shouldn't have that benefit.
Yeah.
Those are the people that are probably going to cause this whole thing to tumble down, unfortunately. But
and licensing. I mean, it's pretty easy to be a licensed pastor.
Yeah. But you do have to do that in case you have to. My understanding is you have to have some kind of documentation or proof that you're an actual minister or a pastor or serve in that religious practice in some way. If you don't, then you can't take the allowance. And that seems reasonable to me.
Well, but to get it, not all. There's not a standardized understanding of what licensure is, and so there's some places where you can $100 online and you are a licensed minister of whatever church you want to be, and that's where things start getting hinky. I think one of the things that, especially in our politically charged climate, that I don't think is going to help this case is the study that you guys just recently did, where the large church senior pastors, their salaries have gone up another 2%. Talk to us a little bit about what you guys were seeing with that Leadership Network.
Well, everybody's getting rich on that one, right?
Oh yeah, 2%.
I don't know what the cost of living was for last year, but no, Leadership Network, in full disclosure, I work with Leadership Network, but we came out with a new look at large church salaries this year and found that senior pastors of very large churches, the salary went up on average about 2% this past year, but it actually went up 0% a year for the 2 years before that. So you're talking, if you are a large church megapastor, on average for the last 3 years, you've had a raise of 2%. But yet all the articles I've seen that have been written about the study, the headline is that senior pastors megachurch pastors are making more money, and it's kind of a, if 2% over 6 years is making more money, then I guess we're all getting rich. I'm not, but somebody is. But and the other thing that's not surprising, and I think this is the way it's been for a long time, that particularly when you get larger as a church, the church size, both represented by budget and attendance, is really the most influential factor in salary differences against congregations. So it's more important than your education. It's more important than how long you've been on staff. The size of the church really has a big leaning on how the church boards or the elders or whatever your structure is sets those salaries. So I guess they figure more people, more responsibility, more salary. I don't know. I guess that's probably the reasoning there.
Well, I think there's an ability thing too. We both know guys that are struggling along and just barely being able to scratch two nickels together in ministry. That the church has the desire, if they were able to pay well, but normally they're not able to pay well until they get big enough to do that.